Easy there, Akira. Take it easy, boy. What on earth did they do to you to get you in such a state? Whispered the woman, her voice breaking on the last word. Beneath the rusted machinery, partially hidden in the shadows, was a dog with the desperate trembling of a creature on the verge of collapse. His coat, which should have been white as snow, was unrecognizable, a tangled mass of dirt, wounds, and despair. Henrik felt himself shaking. In 15 years of animal rescue work, he had never witnessed such cruelty. How could anyone reduce a living being to this condition? This simply cannot go on, murmured Elise, kneeling in the mud. Would you like to know what really happened? Please click the subscription button and comment below to let us know where you're watching from. The gray autumn sky seemed to reflect the gravity of the situation when Henrik and his animal rescue team received the call. A distressed voice reported an abandoned Samoyed on an isolated farm on the outskirts of town. Henrik's heart tightened in his chest. Could it be Akira, the snow-white puppy they had placed in a home just 6 months ago? We need to go right away, Henrik told Elise, his longtime colleague. The journey down the dirt road seemed endless. While driving, Henrik recalled the day Akira left the shelter, his bright black eyes full of expectation, the family promising eternal love and care. When they arrived at the desolate property, reality hit them like a blow. Under an old rusted harvester, trembling uncontrollably, was an unrecognizable creature. The once majestic white coat was now tangled and covered with dried brown mud. Only the eyes, though now filled with terror, revealed that this was indeed Akira. Good heavens, whispered Elise, bringing her hand to her mouth. When he spotted the rescuers, Akira shrank back even more, trying to melt into the shadows. A heavy chain fastened him to the machine, and an open wound on his front paw was bleeding slightly. Akira, it's all right, buddy, Henrik called softly, crouching at a safe distance. We've come to help you. Remember us? The dog responded with a defensive growl, showing his once immaculate teeth, now yellowed. I can't believe that, murmured Gustav, who was filming everything as evidence. This cannot be the same Akira who left the shelter. Look how terrified he is. For nearly an hour, they tried to gain his trust. Henrik offered treats and spoke in a low, melodious tone, but Akira only retreated further under the machine. The poor creature is so traumatized he can't even come out, lamented Henrik. After numerous frustrated attempts, they finally managed to reach him and, with extreme gentleness, pull him into the light. Akira's reaction was immediate. Violent tremors ran through his body as he growled, not out of aggression, but from pure terror. In natural light, the transformation was even more shocking. The proud Samoyed, known for his elegant bearing and smiling expression, was now merely a ghost of himself, his eyes dull like an animal that had lost all hope. This wasn't the life we promised him, said Henrik, his voice choked with emotion. But we're going to fix this. He can't go on like this. We're going to help him remember who he truly is. With Akira still trembling at the end of a large, thick chain, Henrik decided to find the person responsible for such neglect. The team called out repeatedly at the entrance to the property, their voices echoing across the abandoned grounds. After a few minutes, a middle-aged man appeared at the entrance. He wore worn-out clothes and his face displayed a poorly disguised expression of irritation. Are you responsible for Akira? Asked Henrik, keeping his voice steady despite the indignation boiling in his chest. The man shrugged with indifference. You talking about that dog? He belonged to my son, but he had to travel for work and left the animal with me temporarily. Is your son aware of the condition Akira is in? Questioned Henrik, carefully studying the man's reaction. What condition? The man retorted, furrowing his brow. The dog is perfectly fine, just a little dirty. I keep him out front so he doesn't get in the way of my work around the property. He chooses to stay under that machine himself, so he doesn't get too much sun. And as for the dirt, he just gets himself filthy again whenever he gets a bath. Henrik signaled for Elise to approach with Akira. The dog, sensing the man's presence, backed away even further, turning his back to the man as if afraid to even look at his supposed caretaker. Does this look fine to you? Challenged Henrik, pointing to the animal's deplorable state. He's terrified, starving, covered in wounds, and completely traumatized. This is not taking care of an animal, sir. For several minutes, the team tried to explain the gravity of the situation. The obvious malnutrition, the infected wounds, the psychological trauma. But the man remained unmoved, merely repeating, "He's my dog. Mind your own business." A tense silence hung in the air. Henrik exchanged a meaningful look with his colleagues. Without another word, they turned their backs on the man and walked toward the van, taking Akira with them, completely ignoring the indignant protest from the supposed owner. "You can't do this! This is private property!" But the team had already made their decision. Some rules needed to be broken when a life was at stake. At the shelter, the first order of business was removing the heavy makeshift collar that was hurting Akira's neck. Made of rough ropes and rusted chains, it had left deep marks on his skin. "It must have been like this for months," murmured Dr. Jin Woo, the shelter veterinarian, while examining the wounds. Henrik tried to feed him special nutritional paste for weakened dogs, placing small portions directly in his mouth. Akira accepted the food and allowed them to stay close during feeding, but would abruptly back away when they tried to touch his fur. "He doesn't fully trust us yet," observed Elise. "We need time." After several hours of observation, they managed to transfer Akira to the infirmary. Dr. Jin Woo performed preliminary examinations and concluded that a bath was urgently needed to properly assess his injuries. Surprisingly, Akira remained calm during the warm bath, as if the water brought some relief to his aching body. However, when they began to dry him with towels and a hairdryer, something unexpected happened. The dog went into absolute panic, barking frantically and trying to escape, as if the simple touch of towels and the noise of the dryer awakened traumatic memories. "Someone must have hurt him with something similar," Dr. Jin Woo suggested sadly. With patience and offering small pieces of cooked chicken as a distraction, the team managed to calm him enough to carefully shave his matted fur. As the fur was removed, the true extent of the injuries became visible, leaving everyone horrified. His neck showed necrotic tissue, with 3 deep, infected wounds. On his hind leg, there was a cut more than 4 inches long, along with 2 smaller marks that looked like bite wounds. "We need to sedate him immediately," Dr. Jin Woo decided. "These wounds are too severe. When we start working on them, he'll feel pain and become agitated. And from what I can see, there are wounds we'll need to open up to treat from the inside, because there's already a risk of necrosis." During the emergency surgery, the veterinarian explained that the neck lesions were dangerously close to the carotid artery. "If we hadn't found him in time, the infection could have been fatal," he said, inserting a drainage tube to remove the accumulated pus. After surgery, Akira remained under intensive care with intravenous fluid therapy to combat dehydration and administer pain medication. Exhausted but finally safe, the Samoyed fell into a deep sleep for the first time in a very long while. "Now the real battle begins," whispered Henrik, watching the sleeping animal. "Recovery will be long, but we'll be here every step of the way." The next morning, Henrik and Elise returned to the shelter, anxious for any sign of improvement. They found Akira awake, but his gaze still carried that shadow of distrust, as if the ability to trust was a muscle long atrophied. "We brought something special for you, Akira," Henrik said softly, showing a thermal container. Elise prepared a bowl with food specially formulated for convalescing dogs, mixed with scrambled eggs, a delicacy that Akira used to love when he still lived at the shelter before adoption. The inviting aroma filled the small infirmary space. When they placed the bowl in front of him, Akira sniffed with interest and began to eat with apparent enthusiasm. However, after a few bites, he unexpectedly moved away from the food, lying down in the farthest corner of his bed. "It's as if his stomach has shrunk," observed Elise with concern. "He probably went without proper food for so long that he's lost the ability to eat normally." Henrik, recognizing the gravity of the situation, prepared a nutritional solution to mix with Akira's water, hoping to strengthen his system and stimulate his appetite. While they watched the dog fall asleep again, Dr. Jin Woo entered the room with a serious expression. "I heard you talking about having difficulty feeding Akira. I believe it's because of the infection in his neck, which is more serious than we initially thought," explained the veterinarian, showing the test results. "This explains the weakness, lack of appetite, and difficulty swallowing. Moreover, he's dangerously malnourished. Clearly, he hasn't been receiving proper nourishment for months." Silence hung in the room as they absorbed the information. "How long until he recovers completely?" asked Henrik. "His body is too fragile for a quick recovery," Dr. Jin Woo answered frankly. "For now, we'll continue treating the wounds on his legs and the fungal infection in his ears, which fortunately is less concerning than the one on his neck. The intravenous antibiotics and pain medication are essential at this point." Elise gently stroked Akira's head, taking care not to touch him where it might cause discomfort. "He's going to make it, isn't he?" Dr. Jin Woo nodded slowly. "He has a long road ahead, but now he has something he didn't have before: people who truly care." On the third day, Henrik and Elise arrived at the shelter with renewed hope and a different strategy. This time, they brought freshly cooked meat and other highly nutritious and aromatic foods, betting that the irresistible smell might awaken Akira's dormant appetite. When they opened the container, the aroma of succulent meat filled the room. Akira's nostrils visibly dilated, his eyes carefully following every movement as they prepared his meal. When they placed the bowl in front of him, something surprising happened. Without hesitation, the Samoyed began to eat with evident appetite. "Would you look at that?" whispered Elise with tears in her eyes. "He's eating on his own." It was a small victory, but deeply significant. For the first time since the rescue, Akira was demonstrating natural behavior without the paralyzing fear that had dominated all his previous reactions. After finishing the meal, Henrik called his name softly. To everyone's surprise, Akira raised his head, and after a few moments of apparent internal deliberation, slowly approached. With infinite patience, Henrik extended an open hand with small pieces of meat, keeping completely still. Fear was still present in Akira's eyes, but hunger and perhaps a distant memory of trust made him accept the food directly from the rescuer's hand. "That's right, good boy," murmured Henrik, controlling the emotion in his voice. "Nobody is going to hurt you again." It was a fragile moment, like a small flame that could be extinguished by the slightest breath, but it was undeniably a first step. On the fourth day, the transformation continued. When Henrik and Elise entered the room, Akira didn't hide as usual. Although still cautious, the dog seemed less frightened, his eyes more alert and present. "He recognizes us," observed Elise. "He's beginning to understand that we're friends." Following Dr. Jin Woo's recommendation, they brought warm goat's milk, rich in nutrients and easy to digest. Akira approached without being called and carefully drank from the offered bowl. After drinking, the Samoyed returned to his favorite corner, but this time without the defensive posture of previous days. He lay down peacefully, his eyes following the rescuer's movements, without the terror he had shown before. "It's as if a part of him is beginning to remember what it feels like to be safe," commented Henrik, watching the sleeping dog. "We still have a long road ahead, but today was a good day." On the third day, Henrik and Elise arrived at the shelter with renewed hope and a different strategy. This time, they brought freshly cooked meat and other highly nutritious and aromatic foods, betting that the irresistible smell might awaken Akira's dormant appetite. When they opened the container, the aroma of succulent meat filled the room. Akira's nostrils visibly dilated, his eyes carefully following every movement as they prepared his meal. When they placed the bowl in front of him, something surprising happened. Without hesitation, the Samoyed began to eat with evident appetite. "Would you look at that?" whispered Elise with tears in her eyes. "He's eating on his own." It was a small victory, but deeply significant. For the first time since the rescue, Akira was demonstrating natural behavior, without the paralyzing fear that had dominated all his previous reactions. After finishing the meal, Henrik called his name softly. To everyone's surprise, Akira raised his head, and after a few moments of apparent internal deliberation, slowly approached. With infinite patience, Henrik extended an open hand with small pieces of meat, keeping completely still. Fear was still present in Akira's eyes, but hunger, and perhaps a distant memory of trust, made him accept the food directly from the rescuer's hand. "That's right, good boy," murmured Henrik, controlling the emotion in his voice. "Nobody is going to hurt you again." It was a fragile moment, like a small flame that could be extinguished by the slightest breath, but it was undeniably a first step. On the fourth day, the transformation continued. When Henrik and Elise entered the room, Akira didn't hide as usual. Although still cautious, the dog seemed less frightened, his eyes more alert and present. "He recognizes us," observed Elise. "He's beginning to understand that we're friends." Following Dr. Jin Woo's recommendation, they brought warm goat's milk, rich in nutrients and easy to digest. Akira approached without being called and carefully drank from the offered bowl. After drinking, the Samoyed returned to his favorite corner, but this time without the defensive posture of previous days. He lay down peacefully, his eyes following the rescuer's movements without the terror he had shown before. "It's as if a part of him is beginning to remember what it feels like to be safe," commented Henrik, watching the sleeping dog. "We still have a long road ahead, but today was a good day." A week after the rescue, Dr. Jin Woo considered Akira stable enough for a brief outing to the clinic's inner garden. Henrik and Elise prepared enthusiastically for this significant moment. knowing it would be the first time Akira would feel the sun since his arrival. The morning was perfect. Clear sky, mild temperature, and a gentle breeze that softly swayed the tree leaves. With extreme care, they took Akira outside, closely observing his reactions. Initially hesitant, the Samoyed stopped at the garden entrance, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then something extraordinary happened. His nostrils dilated, capturing the multiple aromas of the garden, and his body, previously perpetually tense, visibly began to relax under the welcoming warmth of the sun. "Look how different he is," whispered Elise, filming everything while maintaining distance so as not to interrupt the moment. After a few minutes of timidly exploring the space, Akira approached Henrik and, to everyone's surprise, leaned lightly against his legs. When Henrik crouched down and opened his arms in a silent invitation, the dog didn't back away. Instead, he allowed the gentle embrace, leaning against the rescuer's chest as if seeking the comfort that had been denied him for so long. His eyes, previously dull with fear, now had a different gleam, a small spark of trust being reborn, perhaps even gratitude. Henrik couldn't contain the tears that silently ran down his face as he gently embraced the animal. "Are you seeing this?" he murmured to Elise. "It's like witnessing a miracle." In the following days, Akira's recovery visibly accelerated. His appetite improved, his coat began to regain the characteristic shine of the breed, and he started responding to the call of his name. 10 days after surgery, it was time to change the bandages and assess the healing. Dr. Jin Woo meticulously examined each wound, and for the first time since the beginning of treatment, his face broke into a genuine smile. "The swelling around the wounds has decreased considerably," he announced, showing Henrik and Elise. "Look here, new layers of skin are forming. The healing is progressing better than we expected. Soon we'll be able to remove the stitches." It was like a small medical miracle, an unequivocal sign that Akira was truly returning to life. "After that," continued Dr. Jin Woo, "he'll be ready to leave the hospital and continue his recovery in a more welcoming environment." The next morning, as Henrik was about to leave for the shelter, his cell phone rang. It was Dr. Jin Woo, his normally calm voice now tense with urgency. "Akira's former owner is here," the veterinarian informed him. "He showed up demanding the dog back, claiming theft of property." Henrik felt his blood run cold. "We're on our way," he responded, hanging up immediately. During the entire drive to the clinic, Henrik and Elise barely exchanged words, both consumed by the same distressing concern. When they finally arrived, they found Dr. Jin Woo in the reception area, visibly relieved by their presence. "The man has left," the veterinarian explained, leading them to a more private location. It was quite unpleasant. He demanded the dog, threatened to bring in lawyers, and even the police. "What did you tell him?" asked Elise, nervously wringing her hands. "I was absolutely clear, doctor." Jin Woo responded with unusual firmness. "I told him that Akira is under intensive medical treatment due to severe neglect, and that only the rescue team is authorized to make decisions about him. I also mentioned that we have sufficient photographic and medical documentation for a case of animal cruelty." Henrik let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you, doctor. I would never allow Akira to return to that situation," the veterinarian affirmed. "But I'm afraid the incident has caused some damage." When they entered the treatment room, they immediately noticed the change. Akira was huddled in the farthest corner, visibly trembling. The progress of recent days seemed to have completely disappeared. "He must have heard the man's voice in the hallway," Dr. Jin Woo explained. "When I tried to medicate his ears afterward, he went into complete panic." After several gentle attempts, they finally managed to administer the medication to Akira's ears. But the dog immediately ran back to his bed, hiding under the blanket, overwhelmed by the fear he seemed to have overcome. Henrik, his heart aching at seeing the setback, took some of Akira's favorite treats from his pocket. With infinite patience, he sat on the floor at a safe distance, offering the treats and speaking in a low, melodious tone. "It's all right, buddy," he whispered. "He's not going to take you, I promise." Slowly, Akira's muzzle appeared from under the blanket, drawn by the familiar aroma and the comforting voice. It was a small gesture, but loaded with meaning. Even frightened, something inside him still trusted Henrik. "We need to make sure that man doesn't come near him again," said Elise, determined. "Akira can't go back to that place. Never again." 10 days after the incident with the former owner, the team gathered in the treatment room for a moment they had all been anxiously awaiting. Dr. Jin Woo, with sterile gloves and delicate instruments, was preparing to remove the stitches from Akira's wounds. He's surprisingly calm today, observed the veterinarian as he worked with meticulous precision. It was true. Akira remained patiently lying on the examination table, only an occasional, slight tremor revealing any discomfort. Henrik stayed close, gently stroking the Samoyed's head and murmuring words of encouragement. "There, we're finished, doctor," Jin Woo finally announced, stepping back to admire the result. "Look how beautifully the wounds have healed." Everyone moved closer to observe. Where deep infected wounds had once been, now there were only pinkish lines of new skin. "It's truly remarkable," commented Elise, moved. "Considering the state we found him in, his capacity for recovery is extraordinary," agreed Dr. Jinwoo. "Although he's still thinner than he should be and needs to regain muscle mass, the transformation is nothing short of amazing." 5 days later came the moment that had seemed impossible when they rescued that terrified creature from under the rusted machine. Akira was ready to leave the hospital. On the morning of his discharge, Dr. Jinwoo performed a final examination. Akira, now visibly more confident, allowed the veterinarian to check his neck one last time without showing fear. "The healing is perfect," the doctor confirmed, satisfied. "Just keep the area clean to prevent any secondary infection. The oral medications should continue for another 2 weeks." While Henrik signed the release documents, Dr. Jinwoo provided detailed instructions about continuing the treatment: special diet, light exercises for muscle recovery, and vitamin supplements. "He still has a long road ahead," explained the veterinarian. "The body is healing well, but the emotional scars will take longer." Henrik extended his hand to the doctor with sincere gratitude. "I promise we'll care for Akira with all the love and attention he deserves, doctor. We'll continue the excellent work you began here." When they put the new soft collar on Akira, so different from that cruel chain that had marked his neck, the dog looked at Henrik with something that, for the first time, truly resembled trust. "Let's go home, buddy," Henrik said softly. "The real journey of recovery begins now." 30 days after leaving the hospital, Akira's transformation was evident to anyone who had known him before. In Henrik's home, who had decided to adopt him permanently, the Samoyed was rediscovering what it meant to be a dog. On a golden spring afternoon, Henrik watched from the porch as Akira ran through the fenced garden, happily chasing Luna and Thor, the 2 Labradors who already lived there. His once skeletal body now displayed healthy musculature under the white fur that had grown back luxuriantly. "It's hard to believe he's the same dog," remarked Elise, who visited regularly to follow his progress. It was true. The most striking difference wasn't just in his restored physical condition, but in his spirit. Akira's tail, previously always tucked between his legs, now wagged constantly in a joyful movement that seemed to want to make up for all the lost time. The frightening emptiness that had once dominated his eyes had given way to a contagious vivacity. When called, Akira came running, without hesitation or fear, with only the pure joy of a dog who finally understood that he was safe and loved. "Remember how he used to tremble at the slightest movement?" asked Henrik, as Akira approached for affection, confidently leaning against his legs. "It seems like another lifetime," Elise responded, moved. 6 months after the rescue, Akira's transformation was complete. His white coat shone like snow under the sun, soft and abundant, without any trace of the scars that had once marked his body. Only those who knew his story could imagine the suffering he had endured. During a follow-up visit, Dr. Jin Woo could barely hide his emotions seeing the magnificent Samoyed who confidently entered the clinic, so different from the terrified creature he had treated months before. "Cases like Akira's are the reason I chose this profession," confessed the veterinarian, while examining the now completely healthy dog. Henrik smiled, stroking Akira's soft fur. "His story has inspired many people. The shelter has received more donations and volunteers since we shared his journey on social media." Akira's story, documented from rescue to complete recovery, had become a powerful testimony to animal resilience and the transformative power of genuine care. People from throughout the region, touched by his journey, began adopting more dogs from the shelter and reporting cases of mistreatment. "He didn't just survive," reflected Henrik, watching Akira play happily with a ball. "He taught us that love can truly heal even the deepest wounds." And what about you? What touched your heart the most in Akira's journey? Can you imagine the exact moment when he finally understood he was safe? Please leave your thoughts here in the comments. And if you love animals, click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Together, let's reach our goal of 5,000 subscribers. When you subscribe, you help us continue posting stories that can influence this world to take better care of our animals. I'll give you a moment to like and subscribe. Now imagine a dog so fragile that she can barely stand, abandoned to fend for herself in the middle of the city, under the indifferent gaze of hundreds of hurried people. A stranger moved by compassion interrupts her routine and faces a desperate race against time. The animal is between life and death, and each second could be her last. Will this little dog manage to survive an 11th hour treatment? Are you ready to feel every emotion of this moving journey? Click now on the video appearing on your screen and come with me. Remarkable stories are always just one click away. I'll see you in the next video.